Hi guys, this is my tutorial on how to do the travel adjust on a DVO Diamond Boost fork. This specific model is the D1, all black. If you're wondering why the sheen looks a little different, it's because I actually have a matte Invisishield wrap on the lowers just to kind of protect it. So there's a couple videos on the Diamond already on YouTube, but they're kind of split up into two videos. One is just the travel adjust. The other one is the older Diamond, I believe, disassembly. So you have to kind of piece them together. So I thought I'd make it easy and just do it all in one from an amateur's perspective. So let's flip the fork over. We're gonna start with the air side and we're gonna use an 18mm on the off the top nut on the bottom. All right, should come off pretty easy. So unthread that all the way. You'll kind of feel like a little, kind of like a clanking noise as you turn out. I think that's just maybe the off the top gauge, but that is normal. I'll pull that piece out there and set it aside. And now we can flip the fork up on end. And we are going to be removing the 32mm air chamber. Chamferless socket. This one's a Fox one, but there's a few different brands you can go with. It just basically doesn't have the chamfers on the end, so it sits nice and flush. And the material it's made out of does a really good job to not mar the top cap. Pretty easy to break free there. I know in the video, the DVO video, Ronnie has it standing on end. I have my GoPro mounted, so I'm kind of doing this so it all fits in frame without having somebody have to record for me. We're gonna unscrew that. You should hear a pretty definitive click when it's ready to come out. Which is what they tell you in the DVO video, but in my experience, sometimes you don't have that click. So it seems like I'm backed out all the way here, so I'm just gonna stand the fork up on end. And push down, revealing the air sleeve there. Lay it back on its belly. And now we can take the foot nut. I have a lot of luck just kind of pulling it out from here. In the video though, they use the foot nut, the off the top adjuster, and kind of push it down in there, not thread it. That's, some people get confused to thread it in there, and this next step won't work if you do that. So just push it up so it's resting against the bottom. And then with a rubber plastic mallet, just give it a good whack. All right, that should pop back out. And now the air sleeve should be freed. Pull it out slowly so you don't lose too much oil, especially this last part. It can kind of really pull a good amount out. I don't know if you can see that there. I'm working really slowly, but it's coming out. That's another thing in the DVO video when Ronnie's doing it. It doesn't seem like any oil is coming out, but in my experience, it's kind of hard not to have at least some fallout. But we will cover how to add that back in the end. So now that we have the chamber free, or I'm sorry, the air cartridge, we can move on to the next step, which is adjusting the travel adjust. Okay, now that we have the air cartridge removed, we are going to clean it off, get all the oil off the outside. You can leave the oil on there if you want, but I plan to add it back in the end, and I'll show you how to do that and explain what kind of oil to get and how to go about adding it. So we're going to clamp it in a clamp vise, not just a regular vise. You want to get this tool attachment. This is the Park Tool AV-5 or any type of vise jaws that are for this type of work. This one has the correct 30mm clamp jaw on it. So we want to make sure we clamp towards the base of the cartridge, but not on the threads. And you don't want to He-Man this thing on there. You want to just get it nice and snug to keep it from spinning, because this is the cap that we're going to work on that exposes the travel adjustment. Okay, so right now we haven't let any air out of the fork, neither does DVO in their video. I have about 110 PSI in mine because it came straight off of my bike, and that is what I have it set up to for my rider weight. So ideally, what should happen is you are going to put a 27mm open end wrench on this black collar and unthread it off of the green cap in the center. And you can see it has 3 oval chambers, so you can tell if it spins. So ideally, you will unthread it and it'll break free just like it did there. But again, I've adjusted the travel recently and I already went through the nightmare of trying to get this off. So what's likely going to happen to you if this is your first time doing it, brand new fork, is you're going to take the 27mm wrench, you're going to go to unscrew the collar, and the whole assembly is going to spin, and you'll just spin for days and days and days, and it won't come off because, again, this needs to stay stationary while the collar spins around it. So you have 2 options. The first option is to up the air pressure in the chamber. So you can remove the top cap and add, let's say, 130 PSI to the air cartridge to put a little bit more pressure against this green cap to keep it still while you're unthrowing the collar. So try that first. If that doesn't work, well, your next option is to get a tool like this. This is the Bursman pin spanner tool. So I'll show you how to use this. And also this is a 27mm open end wrench. Both of these items can be bought on Amazon, and I'll throw links in the description as well. So if the air doesn't work and you're still just spinning and nothing's happening, what you want to do is get your pin spanners and you want to drop them into 2 of the chambers. There are other ones that have 3, but I found this one works fine. And you're going to hold that center piece and you're going to unthread it while you're keeping this stationary. And that should work. I've seen people say to add heat to it and all this, but I honestly didn't notice any Loctite on here, so I don't think heat's gonna do too big of a deal. I think it just gets a little tight and it's just kind of stuck there from riding. So again, pin spanners in 2 of the green slots, 27mm open end wrench, and spin it right off. So we're gonna take the collar all the way off by hand. I know some of you are probably cringing right now and thinking, well, you got a air cartridge with 110 PSI of air in it, isn't that going to blow up in your face? And it is not. This is just kind of holding this secure. So once you have this off, you no longer need that air pressure to hold the green cap from spinning. So you're going to unthread this from your vise. Take off your top cap, exposing your air valve. And now you can let out all the air. This is crucial that all air is out of the air chamber before you move forward to the next step. DVO warns you of that as well. I don't know what happens, but I can take a good guess. All right, again, snug that into the vise. So we can kind of move this collar up and out of the way, and you just want to push the assembly down, and you're going to reveal a snap ring that is just in the chamber right along the top there. Get yourself a pair of picks, and then you're just going to find the separation in the snap ring. There it is. It's fairly easy to come. I know some snap rings are kind of a pain, but this one isn't so bad. So just push down and work it out of the channel. There you go. Pretty simple. So that's actually what's holding in all that air pressure. Looks dinky, but snap rings are pretty fail proof. Now we can slide out the entire assembly. And this is actually what you're going to be using to adjust your travel. So let's go over to the bench. And we're going to want to just set this down on a flat area, spring side up, and we're going to grab the whole spring and just kind of twist and work down, and it'll break free there. And I believe this is your off the top spring. You're going to want to pull that one down as well. Now this fork is set at 150 millimeters. So these are your travel spacers. So now if I were to take this off, now we have the full 160 millimeters. This is the 29-inch DVO Diamond D1. So if you run 0 spacers, you're going to be running the full travel of 160. I like mine at 150, and I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes, so I'm going to actually put this back in. But if you wanted to go 140, you would just add 2 of these. And they have a pretty defined notch. You can kind of see how they go in. So this one here has a nice little channel and sits this way, so it is one directional. So please keep in mind the orientation you're putting it on. And you're just going to want to snap it in place. So now I just went from 160 to 150. Obviously, if I had another one in the same orientation below, now we're at 140, but that is it. That's the max. If you can get another one on there, I would advise not to, because it's not spec for that. So once you get that back, we'll slide the off the top spring up. This thing is so slippery. I believe what they use on here is slick honey or slick oleum, which might be the same thing now. And we're just going to want to slide that up and seat it, and it should all sit flush. You shouldn't see any gap in between the off the top kind of plastic fitting on top and the one above it. They should sandwich in the spacer nicely. So get that off the top spring all the way up snug against there, and take the main spring, and you're just going to want to twist. All right, and then it'll snap in place. It's kind of a pain, but if you just kind of work upward and give it a twist, it'll open that spring up and it'll seat. As you can see, it's on there good and tight. So now, you kind of want to just leave this how it is. If you've lost a good amount, you can put more on here, but honestly, this is an excessive amount. I've noticed lately that there's been a lot more in here. If you wanted to, just throw some slick honey in there or slick oleum. And once that's done, we can go ahead and reinstall the assembly. Again, if you drop this or got any grit on it at all, just clean it off, get yourself some suspension cleaner, and just re-lubricate the entire thing, because it's not worth, I mean, even just a little grit of sand can cause some damage. So drop the whole assembly in there. Reinsert that anodized green cap. You're gonna lift the collar up out of the way, and we are gonna work back in the snap ring, and it actually goes in there really easy. If you, I don't know if you heard or saw that, but it just clipped right in. And you can verify now it's locked. That snap ring is doing its job, and I would strongly recommend that you do that and make sure that it's seated properly. And then from here, I'm gonna hold up and I'm just gonna thread it on here just a bit, and you see how it's spinning. There's no air in here. This is the reason that we leave air in the beginning, because with no back pressure against that green anodized collar, once it gets to a certain point, it's just going to spin. See it? You're doing nothing basically when it's spinning with it. So at this point, let me wipe off my hands. You're going to want to add in, per DVO's video, 30 psi to the air chamber to put just enough back pressure on there to get that collar down. Yourself DVO shock pump. I'm sure you probably got one laying around. No link for this one, unfortunately. And I'm actually going to do this right on the vise. So I am just threading it back onto the valve. I lied, this thing's coming off. All right. So thread it back on here. And these DVO mats you can get from DVO. Sometimes they don't have them on their website, but you can call in. They usually have them in the back there, about $20, and they're worth every penny. Make sure you clean that channel out nice so you don't, again, get any contaminants on there. And we're gonna pump it up to 30 PSI. Again, that snap ring's in there, so that's keeping it secure. All right, to get to 30 PSI, go ahead and unthread. Any air you hear coming out, don't be alarmed. That's not the air from the air chamber. That's the air from the shock pump itself. The air that didn't go in. Re-clamp it again towards the base, but mind where the threads are in the 30mm jaw. And now that we have some back pressure against there, we can get our 27mm wrench. Thread this by hand as much as you can. And now this green cap should be at its full exposure, sitting against that C-clip. All right. 27mm open end wrench. You're gonna tighten, and you're gonna tighten it till you see that center cap start to spin, and that should be as tight as it needs to go. And there you go. So that's it. I don't know if the problem at the factory is they're just really tightening these things down, and that's why it's having a hard time for some people getting it off, but per Ronnie and the DVO video, 30 PSI in the air chamber, 27mm wrench, spin until you see that green cap spin, and that should be plenty tight. So now that that is all done, we can move forward with reinstalling the air cartridge into the lowers. All right, guys, now that we got the travel adjusted and our air cartridge, we can move on to the final step, and that's basically putting everything back together. So we're gonna start, and make sure this is crucial that we start with the clean air cartridge. We don't wanna have any dust or anything clinging to the side. Don't be too worried about losing oil. You're gonna wanna have oil anyway, because I know in the videos DVO does, it appears like they don't spill a drop, but done it a few times and it's kind of hard to not lose at least a little bit. So get yourself some 7.5 weight oil. This one is Spectro Golden. And I know Ronnie has approved this one as one that they've used before. It was hard to get, but now you can buy it on Amazon, and I'll put a link in the description below for that. So I got my air cartridge nice and clean. And we're going to reinstall it back into the lowers. Just want to carefully put it in there. You don't want to mar anything on the way in. Be a little snug, and then it'll break free, and then you'll feel it going really easy. Pull the lowers apart a little bit so that way we can get to the threads. I always like to go counterclockwise till you feel it drop. That way you know you're on the threads and you're not cross threading, and then go ahead and hand tighten it clockwise. It's about as snug as you can get it. Now, as you can see, we lost a little bit of oil here. I usually take a good guess just visually looking at about how much oil I lost here, plus the amount of oil I wiped off of the air cartridge itself. And I base that on about 4 cc's of oil loss. So we'll grab our 7.5 weight oil, and then I get these syringes. I think it makes it a lot easier than using measuring cups, especially for this next step. So what we'll do is just drop the syringe in, and I'll put a link to these below too. This is also an Amazon item, fairly cheap, makes the job a lot easier. And we can just put it down in there, and you got about 4 cc's in the syringe. Now this next part, I know in DVO's video they say you want to hold it at an angle, and it does kind of help to see where you're putting the oil, and you don't want to put it into the threads of the air cartridge where the off the top nut goes in. I don't know if you can see down in there, but you'll see the bottom of the air cartridge. It's that classic anodized, green DVO color. And then you'll see the space between there. That way you just go straight into the lowers. Obviously you don't want to scratch anything in there either, even with the tip of the needle. Sure, it won't hurt it, but Good practice. And push that in there. And then now that you got the oil in, set these back down. You can compress the lowers till you feel it bottom out. And now you'll be able to see those green anodized threads there for the off the top foot nut. So we can go ahead and reinsert that. And again, good practice. Make sure everything's clean. You're not putting any grit in there. A nice clean microfiber rag. Same ordeal. I like to go counterclockwise until I feel it drop. There we go. And then start to thread clockwise. That way you are sure you're on the threads. If you feel any resistance, I mean, it goes in fairly easy, but if you feel any resistance where it's stopping, you should really back out and make sure you are not doing something that could damage the threads. So I'm just tightening this down by hand as much as I can. And per DVO's video online, torque down to 10 Newton meters. I already have my wrench set to it. And this is a pretty decent torque wrench too that I got off Amazon. I'll also put a link down here below. Got a lot of items racking up now. But this is stuff you'll always need. And this one I found does most of the things on a bike. Make sure to keep that seated nicely against that foot nut. Keep everything on the outside nice and shiny, even though this stuff does get thrashed up. These forks hold up extremely well though, in my experience. There's not a better one on the market. There we go. 10 Newton meters. Hopefully that's what I said earlier. I'm starting to think I said foot pounds, but it's 10 Newton meters on the lower. And then also per their video, it's going to be 10 on the top cap as well. Again, chamferless top cap. This one's by Fox, also bought on Amazon. I'll have a link below. Torque wrench is already set to 10 Newton meters. And there we go. Obviously got a bit of oil everywhere, so take some isopropyl alcohol, clean microfiber rag. Get everything nice and clean. This is where you can add the air back to the top cap. And before you add the air, actually, you probably want to adjust your off the top. It is recommended to adjust off the top to where you had it before. Take note of, how many clicks you had and adjust that. Then add your air to the top cap, 50 PSI compress, 50 PSI compress until you get to the desired amount of air pressure. I hope this video was helpful. If you guys have any suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. And give me a follow if you can. I'm going to be doing a lot more videos like this, as well as some product reviews, and really just trying to get some good mountain bike content out there for everybody. Thanks for watching. Have a good one, guys.